Another blood-red sunset and yet another moon phase, and still another 100 miles to my next resting place. Driving down the road, eyes on the horizon. Within my car, I'm all alone, but feeling good and feeling strong, knowing that this path I'm on brings me to myself. I'm driving.
Hey now all, I'm Joey C. Welcome back to another episode of Spirit Sherpa. This is the show that helps and encourages you on your journey to unlock your magic mojo. With me as always is the Spirit Doctor, Kelle Sparta. Hey Kelly.
Hey Joey.
What's happening?
I took a nap.
You know what? Naps are delightful.
I love my naps.
So delightful. I love them. Now you're all refreshed and
I am.
ready to go. We're doing some more podcasts.
We learned from other times of doing 4 episodes in a row that it was a really bad idea. Yeah. So we actually split this up into 2 sections.
You know, people are like, oh, it's just podcasting. And it's like, no, it's like energy work in a compressed little thing. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yes, there is.
And we've got a topic today that is a very long title.
Yeah, it kind of had to be. I tried to think of how to shorten it, but it really couldn't be.
But it ties into something we talked about. And the question you got, and this was from our friend Ken.
Yep.
And he wanted you to talk a little more about the difference between symbology and metaphor. Now, we've talked about this a couple times before, but you thought it would be interesting to kind of take symbology and metaphor and talk about how it applies in omens, portents, rituals, and journeys.
Yes. Well, you know, Ken's on his 12th listening of the entire podcast, so he wants more detail. And so I'm assuming that after 12 times of listening to it, if he still wants more detail, then I probably haven't given enough.
We've got to give it out there, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought I would give it up since if he wants more, probably other people do too.
Yeah.
But I wanted to put it in this context because I didn't want to be like, oh, we've done this before, right?
Okay. So let's talk about first, sort of set a foundation for the inclusion of omens, portents, rituals, and journeys. I'd like to just sort of hit on each of those words real quick, just to make sure everybody knows what those things are.
Okay. An omen is an indicator of, you know, something to pay attention to.
Okay. Like foreshadowing sort of event kind of thing?
Yeah, it can be foreshadowing. It could be, you know, trying to think of a good example. So the other day, you know, I think we even may have mentioned this on the podcast, but maybe not. The other day I was out and the sky was weird.
Okay.
And I mean weird, not in there's going to be a thunderstorm or there's going to be a tornado way, but there was something not right in the sky. Mm-hmm. And you looked up and you're like, something ain't right. And I asked the weather gods, are you being manipulated in some way? Is there a problem going on? And they're like, nope, we're fine. And so it wasn't about the weather itself. It was something ain't right in the sky. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just paying attention. We'll see what's coming down the pike. Yeah. But something ain't right. And so, you know, that's sort of an omen, right? A portent is generally an indicator of the future sort of thing.
Okay. And
things like crows landing at your feet are meant to be signs that someone's going to die.
Okay.
You know, hearing in Practical Magic, which is a movie I love, they talk about the bugs that chirped to indicate the death of a love of one of the women. Mm-hmm. That's a portent.
Okay. Would that be like if a bird poops on you, it's good luck?
Good luck.
Okay.
in Italy, that's considered good luck.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So that's a portent, right? Mm-hmm. Those are signs.
Right.
And omens and portents are generally things people talk about as being, ooh, it's a sign.
Okay. Yep.
Now, when we're talking about ritual, then it's different.
Okay.
So there are 2 types of ritual. We've talked about this in great detail.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk just about transformational ritual because that's the only thing I really care about.
Okay.
So we're just going to talk about transformational ritual. In transformational ritual, it is, again, what we were saying in the last episode, which is it's about creating a space in which you have the opportunity to transform from one state of being to another.
Okay.
It's an initiation rite. Mm-hmm. And then in journeying, a journey or a guided meditation, if that's the way you want to look at it, although not all journeys are guided, but whatever. in journeying, you are going into another realm. It's sort of like it's kind of like a ritual, but in your head.
Okay.
Instead of in physical reality, right?
So in this context of what you just sort of defined for us in those things, anybody who is paying attention can sort of see from the start that all of those things are loaded to the brim with symbology.
Yes.
I mean, they are literally built around the different elements, which are largely symbolic.
Yes.
So I guess, do they all tie together, or did you want to, when you want to touch on these, do you want to touch on them individually, or is there a thread that ties there?
Well, I kind of want to talk about symbology and metaphor as elements of these things.
Elements of these. Okay.
Right?
Great.
So in omens and portents, generally you have a single symbol.
Okay.
It's rare that it's a combination, right? Unless the spirits are really trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
You know, when Jeff and I, my husband, when we first met, and we just got together, we were together for like 2 or 3 weeks, and everywhere we looked, there were wedding things. I mean, everywhere. We turned on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And there was a wedding.
And there was a just married car driving down the street that probably got stomped by an alien from out of from another planet. But it was a just married thing. And everywhere we went, there were things around getting married. And every time we turned off something we were watching, the Kardashian wedding was happening. And it was insane, the amount of stuff, the signs that we received over and over and over again about wedding, to the point where, you know, about 3 months in, I mentioned to a girlfriend of mine that I had told about about us getting together. I told her, 6 weeks before that, which was 6 weeks into our relationship. I had told her about it. And then, 3 months later, I was like, all this shit is happening. And she's like, oh, good. I can tell you now. I'm like, what? She said, the angel said he came in for you. He's here for you. The angels told me that the first time you mentioned him to me, and I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would freak you out. I'm like, you're right. It would have freaked me out. So there was no doubt in anyone's mind that this was meant to be. Right? We just got whacked over the head over and over and over again with it. And so, it was a bunch of different things, but all related to the same thing.
Right.
Omens and portents are always just symbols.
Okay.
They're symbology, right? And so, the just married car, or the have you thought about, where you're going to get catered, or, here's a wedding cake, or these are all symbols, right? When you're dealing with journeys and ritual, now you're going to get into a combination of symbols and into metaphor.
Okay.
Metaphor is where you're using a storyline or a story arc that is in the collective consciousness. And so, the hero's journey is a classic, Odysseus and Harry Potter and, Frodo and, whatever, right? That's the hero's journey. That's a classic metaphor that can be used in ritual.
Okay.
Then you can use specific metaphors, right? You can use specific stories from mythology if you wanted to do that. So the descent of Inanna is a big one. When you're doing more advanced and deeper shadow work, the descent of Inanna gets used a lot.
Right.
That's a storyline that you follow through.
Now, with that case, so you talked about the metaphor of the hero's journey, which is, as you mentioned, is sort of non-specific. The hero's journey is a construct, a metaphorical construct that we know that gets applied across pretty much every adventure literature ever done has followed some sort of hero's journey. But when you're talking about the descent of Inanna, you are talking about a specific story, which would not be extrapolated to something. It's not the Harry Potter Frodo. It's a specific thing. Is that?
It can be.
Okay. So does it become a construct as well?
It can be. It isn't used broadly enough. I think a better example would be Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
There's been a billion different versions of Pride and Prejudice, and, they're not all called Pride and Prejudice.
Right.
Well,
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. Bridget Jones's Diary was Pride and Prejudice, right? It just is. So, sometimes, the Descent of Inanna isn't as well known. It's only really known in pagan circles, really. Yeah. So it doesn't get the broad scope of appeal. But, I've talked about Mamma Mia being an Aphrodite mythos, right? It's an Aphrodite tale, which is why it was so wildly popular. Yeah. Because that's a collective unconscious, right? Because it was in the collective consciousness back in Greek and Roman era, and it was being resurrected into the collective consciousness through this movie. Okay. But the reason it was successful is because it was still existing within the collective unconscious.
Because we all already knew it, even though we didn't know we knew it.
Exactly. When you're looking at Pride and Prejudice, or when you're looking at Romeo and Juliet, or any of Shakespeare's plays, really, because his stuff has been ripped off more times than I can count, too. Those are classic metaphors. Right. And those can be used as structures for a journey or a ritual sort of context. And then within that overall structure, then you apply symbology. And so let's use Romeo and Juliet as an example. Okay. So two star-crossed lovers, two families who don't like each other and who will not bless the union no matter what. Right. They see no choice but to spend eternity together. So, symbology in that is going to be the poison that's taken is, drunk from a chalice, which is the feminine symbol, the masculine dagger going into the chalice and making the birth of the new space of being. When you're dealing with symbology, then it's about how do I support the image of what I'm trying to create. So there's a little known thing outside of film students that in a movie, if someone's going to die, then you will often see the color red just before they die. Okay. And something I didn't know, Carolyn Kepish actually was a film student, and she told me this. And sure enough, it's true. And if you go back and you watch Sixth Sense, you can see that every time he is shown, Bruce Willis is shown, something red is in the frame. And so that's a subtle hint that he's dead, right? Yep. And if you didn't know the end of that movie, you get a life. You should. You should have watched it by now. So I don't feel bad. The upshot is that there are symbols that are within the collective consciousness. So if you see a cross, it has symbology associated with it, right? Depending upon where it's put. If it's a plain cross on a coffin, well, then it's a symbol of death. Right. If it's a cross with Jesus on it, and then it's a symbol of Catholicism. Yeah. And it can be any number of things depending upon where it's shown. So symbols often are contextualized by their environment. Right now, my husband and I are watching Memories of the Alhambra, which if you have not watched it on Netflix is amazing. It's really, it's a fantastic show. It's Korean, and so it's subtitled, but it's totally worth reading the subtitles for. The premise is that he's playing this game that is sort of unlike virtual reality. It's an actual reality. And so at one point he levels up and he sees this hawk overhead that no one else can see. It's just for him because he's leveled up to the level where he can see it now. And it lands and it gives him a quest, right? Classic symbology there, right? The hawk is the bringer of messages. That's a classic symbol. If he had used something other than a hawk, it would have been the wrong symbol. Yeah. Harry Potter uses symbology. The owls are very interesting because they bring wisdom from the outside world, right? Owl is wisdom. Yeah. And so, Gandalf. Yeah. Gandalf is a metaphor unto himself. he is Merlin the mage, right? Yeah. He is, Gandalf and Merlin are basically the same, as is Dumbledore. Yeah. They're all the same character. They're a symbol within it, but they are their own metaphor in and of themselves.
The wise ancient wizard with knowledge
all-knowing,
beyond
yes.
what they should know. Yes.
Exactly. And even Voldemort is that same wizard, but gone bad.
Right.
Just like Sauron is.
Right.
So it's the same concept. In Arthurian legend, it would be the Morwen? Crap, what's her name?
Morgan. Not Morgan. That was
no, it's not the Morgan. It's
Morgan. Morgana.
Morgana. Morgan Le Fay.
Morgan Le Fay. That's it.
Morgan Le Fay. I knew it.
Knew it was something.
I knew we would do it.
We got there. We got there.
So it's Morgan Le Fay in Arthurian legend. So these are all the wizards who came up, had the opportunity to make good and fell prey to power for power's sake.
Right.
As I tell people, look, if you don't want to go bad in magic, stop looking for power outside of yourself.
Okay.
And stop looking to use power outside of yourself. It's only when you are using power for your own purposes, for your own beingness, that you won't go bad.
Right.
Okay. Symbology and metaphor. The symbols that we choose are often linked to what we're trying to accomplish within a journey, right? Mm-hmm. So we probably should have done this episode after I did a shamanic journey for everyone so that they would have had an experience of it. But the symbols that you choose are relevant, right? And symbols go across multiple areas, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got literature and movies, which have their own storylines. And then you've got culture. Yep. So in Asian culture, generally, if somebody dies, you're wearing white. Mm-hmm. And in Western culture, you're wearing black.
Yep.
And so that symbol changes depending upon who you're being with. There's also in Native American culture, there is things such as power animals and animal messengers, and things like that, which is where the piece from Hawk comes from, right? As well as in conjure, right? Because we talked with Karen about how conjure comes out of, life.
Yeah.
And that's going to have its own piece too. And Celtic religion has stuff around wildlife and things of that nature as well. And they have their own mythos. Right. They have their own mythology, right? So Caradwen, the cauldron of Caradwen, is a huge symbol in Celtic mythology. So when you're looking at all of this, what you have to realize is that, and it's very funny because I see people do things all the time where they're like, oh no, this cultural appropriation stuff that people get stuck in. When you're doing magical workings, all symbols exist in all collective unconscious. So while I do not feel like I can or should stand up and say, oh, I'm a shaman in Native American tradition, because I ain't. Right. And I would never do that. It doesn't mean I can't use a symbol that's from that tradition. Right. If I'm using it respectfully.
Yep.
So if I were to do a ritual around compassion, I would actually put Christ and Kuan Yin on the altar.
Right.
You want to talk about two disparate cultures, right? But both of them represent the essence of compassion. You could even do Christ and Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
You could do that. It's what holds the symbol for you.
And what holds the metaphor as well.
Yeah. Well, symbol, metaphor, whichever one you're working with in the moment. Right. Yeah. And when we're just talking compassion, then that would be a symbol.
Right.
A metaphor usually has a storyline associated
to it. Okay.
You're probably wondering where I'm pulling all of these from. And I believe in the last time we talked about this, I said, look, just go get a dream interpretation journal and that'll help you.
Yeah.
And it will. It's really a good idea. And you could pick up some stuff on animal speaks and stuff like that for Native American culture and just study culture because, there are things that mean things that we don't even think about day to day, but are actually things that mean things.
Right.
Just simply pointing your finger and cocking it like a gun is a symbol.
Right.
That's a symbol right there.
Yeah.
And it's going to freak some people out. But, it was the easiest one I could think of. The peace sign is a symbol. I'll do the opposite. There we go. I love you, right? The I love you sign, the shaka, just hang out.
Yeah.
Right?
Or if you take the shaka and you put it to your ear and your mouth, it means call me.
All right. It's the phone. Call me.
Yeah.
So, there's all sorts of things that we have that we can use. And there's ways in which we communicate non-verbally on a regular basis. And all of that is done with symbology.
Okay. So let's sort of start to wrap this a little bit and put a little bow on it for folks, because we have talked over the course of the series a lot about symbology and metaphor, but I don't think that it ends with any one episode. I think that symbology and metaphor are so vital to everything we do from a magical perspective. They are, it's like you talked about, they're the cornerstone, not only to just about every organized religion that ever existed. I mean, they're all built around metaphor. They're all built around symbology, but also all the magical workings we're going to do, whether that's conjure or whatever it is, we're using symbology to drive forth our intent and our manifestations that we're doing in our work.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Joey. When we're doing magic, we're setting intent, but we're also building things with the symbols that we use. So the wand that we use is used to direct the focus.
Right.
The cup that we drink from is used to provide feminine intuition and moisture and sustenance and the water of life to us. And as we drink it, we take in the energy that's in the liquid in the cup, right?
Yeah.
It's all a symbolic act. When you banish something, pretty sure Karen talked about banishing in her episode.
Yeah.
A lot of it's about sending the energies away, right? And that's all symbolically done.
Right.
When we work with the symbols, we work with the collective unconscious to support and further our actions. And so that's why using symbols are so important.
And that's where it sort of drives us to at this point is that, we could do 20 episodes on symbology and on metaphor, but really what it comes down to, it sounds to me as though we really just need to get comfortable. Those of us who are learning, those of us who get comfortable with symbology, get comfortable with metaphor, and get comfortable with how we incorporate it into our journeys along this path.
Yeah, one of the best things you can do if you want to educate yourself is sit down on Wikipedia and just read all of the mythology stories of all the cultures that you can find.
And you could go to the library and take out books and books and books on stuff. I know my teenage daughter is a huge mythology fan, and she reads everything she can get her hands on for any mythology out there. I can almost guarantee that this is going to be part of her future from that perspective. Like she just absorbs them all. And she actually told me the other day she was in a history class where the history teacher was talking about something to do with Greek mythology. And she said, I was just under my breath correcting him because he was wrong. Not about big things, but just about, I'm like, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
She was doing it under her breath.
Exactly.
If that had been me back in the day, I would have told him he was an idiot.
Exactly.
Because I felt the need to correct everybody.
All right. Well, this has been great. I think that we sort of added a lot of depth to our conversations about symbology and metaphor. That while we've talked about it before, there's nuance and depth that comes when you apply it to these specific things like omens, portents, rituals, and journeys. It's sort of how it's applied there that starts to give us a little bit more understanding and comprehension on how to grasp and use it.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, really the best way is just to work with them.
Right.
It's not until you actually get to the point of working with them that you really get a grip on how it works,
Exactly.
So the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. and the more it sort of sinks in at a visceral level.
Absolutely.
We don't learn as much classic literature, and fairy tales are another classic way to find symbols as well. The glass slipper is a classic symbol.
Yep.
You show a glass slipper, everybody knows it's Cinderella. Right. Everybody.
Yep.
So that's the sort of thing that when you're deep into it just becomes part and parcel of what you're doing. And the Dan Brown books are a great way to find symbols in symbology too, because he's mired in them.
Yeah.
Right?
And the interesting thing is how the symbols then tie into the metaphors themselves. You talked about the glass slipper. That's a great one. But if you were to show a construct of any lost shoe, a single shoe that's been lost, people will tie that back to the story of Cinderella and then the metaphor that goes along with that. It becomes...
Or if you present an apple.
Right.
People will tie it to Eve and or
Snow White.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
Same thing. Evil apple.
Evil apple. There, the apples become evil. Exactly.
Right.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. And folks, if you have any questions or if this sort of brings up stuff that you want to put out, why don't you do it in the Facebook group? Join the Spirit Sherpa Podcast After Party Facebook group. It's a great place to have conversations about this stuff because there is a lot about this. And this could actually generate some really interesting conversation between the listeners who have thoughts about symbols and metaphors that they might want to use. Because, like I said, we can't have an episode that goes across, here's every single symbol and every single metaphor and every single mythology and all of these. Here's everything laid out in a single book. It's more about that comfort level and people starting to use them. And the more you use them, the more you find them, the more you get comfortable with them. Come into the After Party Facebook group and let us know what you think and what are some symbols and metaphors that you're using that others might want to know about. And if you're listening to the show, which if you can hear us saying this, then you're listening to the show. We want you to subscribe and rate. So let the whatever podcast listening app you're listening on, let them know what you think about what Kelle's doing and rate the show. Rate it really, really high. That would be wonderful.
Yes, please.
Give us a good review. And definitely get out there, but share it as well. We've talked about this a couple times. We'll keep saying this over and over again. Sharing is caring. So definitely get out there and share the podcast with your friends where it's relevant. And last but not least, KelleSparta.com, where you can go and get information on what Kelle has going on. You can book a discovery session. You can check out any of her services. And
get the Boundaries for Empaths
program.
Get the
Boundaries for Empaths program, which is now free.
It is.
Even without the code. Now you've just made it available to everyone. So there you go, folks.
I'm like that.
Yeah, you're pretty good like that. All right. Before we wrap up, any final words you have?
Am I dying? You said final words.
Before we wrap up the episode, Kelle, was that symbolism or metaphor? I don't know what's going on. Holy moly. Now, if you die, they're going to blame me. You know that, right? Jiminy crickets. Okay. Well, anyway, that is all.
I don't have any final words.
Yeah, now I'm not even letting you get them if you did have them. All right, folks, that is all that we have for this week. But be sure to join us next time as Kelle, when she's alive, adds another chapter into your guide to energy, magic, and the spirit world. I'm Joey C., here with Kelle Sparta, and you have been listening to Spirit Sherpa. So long, everyone.
Bye. It was nice knowing you.
Oh, my goodness.
Each mile I travel over 13,000 now. I leave behind a little fear.
Spirit Sherpa is the sole property of Kelle Sparta Enterprises and is distributed under Creative Commons BY-NC-ND 4.0 license. For more information about this licensing, please go to creativecommons.org. Any requests for deviations to this licensing should be sent to KELLE@KELLESPARTA.com. That's Kelly@KelleSparta.com. To sign up or to get more information on the programs, offerings, and services referenced in this episode, please go to KelleSparta.com. This episode of Spirit Sherpa has been produced by Honu Voice Productions.